Oshea is the savvy CEO of a vast business empire that includes a successful restaurant chain, a signature line of rum, and a range of whole food products. The Oshea Empire was built on some of the finest ingredients cultivated in Jamaica, reflecting both quality and heritage. He credits his father, Roy Henry, as the inspiration behind his drive to succeed. Yet Oshea barely knew him. His father died when he was just 2 years old. Growing up, Oshea was told that his father had died in an automobile accident. It was not until years later, while he was in college, that he uncovered the truth. After discovering an old newspaper article, he learned the reality. His father had been an entrepreneur and community leader who was murdered amid the internecine political warfare surrounding the 1989 general election. That revelation changed everything. It shook him. Oshea chose to honor his father's entrepreneurial spirit, but to do so with integrity and within the law. Although his father's legacy deeply influenced his path, Oshea never had the chance to build relationships with that side of his family. The absence left a lasting curiosity and a strong desire to understand his roots. It wasn't just curiosity. He felt a part of himself was missing. Oshea was raised in a loving Christian household. While his mother, Jessia, was present, his grandparents played a central role in shaping his upbringing. After his father's death in Kingston, his mother returned to Portland, where her parents welcomed them in and helped raise him. His mother rarely spoke about his father, which only deepened Oshea's determination to learn more. With little information to guide him, he began searching for his father's ancestry from the ground up. He did not even know the name of his paternal grandmother. Still, driven by a need for connection and identity, Oshea committed himself to uncovering the story of where he came from. With professional help, Oshea uncovered the identities of his paternal grandparents, Joseph Henry and Bede Henry, née Morris. Together, they operated a gas station and supermarket, a testament to the entrepreneurial spirit that ran through the family. As he traced his bloodline, Oshea discovered more than just names and dates. He uncovered a legacy of resilience, ambition, and enterprise that felt deeply personal. That same spirit had shaped his father and now lived on in him. His search eventually led him further back into Jamaica's past, to one of its most painful chapters, the era of chattel slavery. Confronting this history gave Oshea a deeper understanding of the strength and perseverance woven into his family's story, and of the foundation upon which his own journey was built. One evening, Oshea quietly cleared the table. "Mum," he said, his voice steady but filled with restrained excitement, "I have something to show you." Jessia watched curiously as Oshea carefully unfolded a large sheet of paper and laid it out before her. "This is my father's entire family tree," he said softly. For a moment, she said nothing. Her eyes moved slowly across the page, taking in the names and the connections. Then her hand rose gently to her mouth, emotion overtaking her. "How did you get this?" she whispered. Oshea smiled. "I went looking for my ancestry," he said gently. "I worked with a genealogist. Starting with nothing, we kept digging, asking questions, and following every lead. We didn't stop until we traced my family history piece by piece until I finally discovered my lineage." "This is amazing," Jessia whispered, her eyes still fixed on the page. As she took it all in, Jessia felt a quiet but powerful desire to discover her own roots. She looked up at Oshea. "I assume you're going to do my family tree next?" she asked, a hint of hope in her voice. Oshea smiled softly. "I've already been thinking about it," he said. "I want to uncover and document everything about your side of the family too." Jessia looked at him with pride, a soft smile forming. "I'd like that," she said. "This is something special, Oshea." When Oshea began exploring Jesiah's ancestry, he chose not to rely solely on the paper trail. Instead, he turned to DNA testing, hoping to uncover connections that records alone could not reveal. It would prove to be an invaluable decision, especially in unraveling a profound mystery on the maternal side of the family. Oshea and Jessia both took DNA tests to learn more about their ancestry. The results were reviewed by a genetic genealogist who compared their DNA with matches in several databases. One match stood out. A woman named Bernice Lindsay shared a significant amount of DNA with Jessia. They had a 14% match, which usually indicates a first cousin relationship. If Bernice is your mother's first cousin, the genealogist explained, then one of Bernice's uncles would have to be one of your mother's parents. Oshea frowned. That did not make sense. There had never been any link between the Lindsay family and either of Josiah's late parents, Millicent Holgate or Enric Watson. To investigate further, the genealogist compared Jessia's DNA with that of Enric's nephew. If Enric were truly her father, your mother and his nephew would share about 12.5% of their DNA, he said. Oshea looked at the results. There was no match. Everything he thought he knew about his family shifted. For a moment, he no longer knew where he belonged. We are not seeing any shared DNA here, the genealogist continued. This means Enric Watson is not your mother's biological father. The words settled slowly. What had once been certain now felt fragile. Oshea could not speak. The man who had played such an important role in Jessia's life and whom Oshea had known as his grandfather was not biologically related to them. Oshea was left speechless. The truth felt impossible to accept. Both he and Jessia were devastated. After a long moment, Oshea let out a heavy sigh, struggling to process it all. The man who raised me, who was so kind to me, wasn't my blood, he whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. With tears streaming down her cheeks, a confounded Jessia pulled her son into an embrace, trying to comfort him while needing comfort herself. In that moment, Oshea struggled to understand. How could his grandmother betray a man who had been so loving and kind? How could something like that happen in a relationship that seemed built on such deep love and respect? The thought unsettled him more than he expected. After days of stress and conflicting thoughts, Oshea made a decision. He needed to uncover the identity of his mother's biological father. The genealogist returned to the strongest lead, the DNA match with Bernice Lindsay. If she was truly Josiah's first cousin, the connection had to come through one of her uncles. They studied Bernice's family tree more closely. One detail stood out. She had only one paternal uncle. His name was Jasper Lindsay. If our conclusion is correct, the genealogist said, then Jasper Lindsay would be your mother's biological father. Jasper had already passed away, so the next step was to test his children. Josiah's DNA was compared with that of Valda Lindsay and Lawrence Lindsay. This time, the results were clear. They shared about 25% of their DNA. The genealogist nodded. This level of shared DNA is what we expect between half-siblings. Oshea stared at the report, letting it sink in. So they are my mother's brother and sister, he said quietly. Yes, the genealogist replied. They share the same father. There was no longer any doubt, but the truth did not feel complete. Despite the certainty of the results, the question of Millicent's infidelity still lingered. Nonetheless, Valda and Lawrence, eager to meet her, welcomed the chance to connect with their half-sibling, Jessia. Weeks later, Oshea drove his mother to St. Anne's Bay to meet their newly discovered family. When they arrived, a small crowd stood waiting outside the house, relatives they had never known, ready to welcome them with open arms. After the greetings and the initial excitement settled, Valda and Lawrence sat Jessia down. There was something they needed to share. Our father always said he had a first child, Valda began. He didn't know if it was a boy or a girl. Dad told me, she continued, thinking back, that there was a preacher man. Pastor Stewart? Lawrence chimed in. Yes, Valda nodded. Pastor Stewart came here as the new minister of the Baptist church. He brought his wife and children with him. Dad said that after some time, he and the oldest daughter, Sarah, started seeing each other in secret. She paused briefly before continuing. But she became pregnant. Not long after, rumors began to spread about them and the pregnancy. Then Pastor Stewart left the area with his family. Dad said he never saw Sarah again after that, Lawrence added quietly. But Jessia barely heard the rest. Her thoughts had already drifted. She tried to hold on to what she knew, but the pieces no longer fit. For the first time, she questioned the story she had always believed was her life. Her mother's name was Millicent, not Sarah. Her grandfather had been a teacher, not a pastor. None of it made sense. Oshea sat beside her, equally stunned by the revelation, trying to piece together a story that no longer seemed to fit. On the drive home, Oshea could not shake a growing doubt. The story they had just heard did not fully make sense. The more he thought about it, the more something felt wrong. He glanced at his mother. For the first time, he found himself wondering if Millicent was really her mother. Jessia sat quietly beside him, lost in thought. The same question had begun to form in her own mind. When they got home, they decided to test it. They compared Jesiah's DNA with that of one of Millicent's nieces. If Millicent is your biological mother, you would share about 12% of your DNA, the genealogist explained. They waited for the results. There was no match. Jessia felt the ground shift beneath her. The foundation of her life no longer felt solid. She stared at the report, her hands trembling slightly. "So she is not my mother," she said softly. The genealogist nodded. "There is no shared DNA," the genealogist said. "She is not your biological mother." The truth was difficult, but it answered everything. Millicent had not betrayed her husband. The story was something else entirely. They searched for records to explain what had happened. Then they found it. The hospital records showed that a young woman named Sarah Stewart had given birth to a baby girl on January 5, 1964 in Port Antonio. She was only 17 years old. Jesiah's birth certificate told a different story. It had been registered more than a year later, in 1965, under the name Jessia Watson. Oshea looked at the two documents side by side. A slow realization set in. "You were adopted," he said gently. The words cut deeper than anything she had ever heard before. Jessia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath as the truth settled in her chest. It finally made sense. With further research and DNA confirmation, the connection became clear. Sarah Stewart was her biological mother. For a moment, neither of them said a word. And then came the most unexpected discovery of all. Sarah was still alive. She was living in St. James. The very next day, Oshea drove Jessia to meet her. Jessia did not know what she would say when she saw Sarah. All she knew was that she could not wait to meet her. The long journey felt endless, filled with anticipation, fear, and hope. Neither of them spoke much. There were no words for what they were about to face. When they arrived, a small crowd had gathered outside the house, waiting. The car came to a stop. Jessia stepped out. The crowd slowly parted, almost instinctively, as if they knew this moment did not belong to them. Her eyes were fixed on one person. An elderly woman sat quietly on the veranda. Sarah. The resemblance was undeniable. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then Sarah rose to her feet, her hands trembling, her eyes already filled with tears. "My child," she cried, her voice breaking. The word came easily, as if it had always been waiting. "Mum!" Jessia ran forward. and then they were in each other's arms. They held on tightly as if trying to reclaim the years that had been lost. Tears flowed freely. "I didn't abandon you," Sarah sobbed. "They forced me. My parents forced me to give you up." Jessia shook her head, holding her even tighter. "Mom, I understand," she whispered. "A pastor's teenage daughter, having a child out of wedlock. I can only imagine what you went through." Sarah pulled back just enough to look at her hands trembling as she held Jesiah's face. "My child, you will never know the pain of losing you," she said. "I loved your father, Jasper, with everything I had, but they tore us apart, and then they took you from me. They said you were a disgrace, that I had brought shame." Her voice broke completely. "I had no choice." Jessia pulled her back into an embrace, both of them overcome with grief and love all at once. After a moment, Sarah buried her head in Jessia's chest, holding on to her as if she might disappear again. "Jesiah," her voice trembled. "God bless that nurse. I begged her to make sure you kept the name I chose for you. I prayed for it." Jesiah wept softly. "I think today finally gives meaning to my name," she said. "God, behold this moment." "Thank you, Lord," Sarah whispered, tears in her eyes. "You've answered my prayer." Oshea stepped onto the veranda, his vision blurred with tears. He placed a gentle arm around them, holding them both. Around them, the crowd fell silent, many wiping away their own tears. In that moment, pain and healing stood side by side. What had been lost could never be returned. But at last, the truth had found its way home. In that truth, they finally understood where they belonged. If you enjoyed this story, consider liking and subscribing to Word, Sound and Story for more dramatic tales by Troy Mackenzie.